honestly always said I didn't care if I was diagnosed. However, what it's done is it has allowed me to get back to being free to be me, fully free to be me, and educating others on what it means to be me, and then letting them choose if they want to come along with me or continue to try and make me feel less than.
Well, we're so excited to have Lisa Richer on the show today. Thank you so much, Lisa, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Should be a fun
Yeah.
conversation.
I was on your website earlier. I was like, we could take this conversation about 10 different directions, but we're going to try to keep it focused for you today. But we always start our show off with a quick win for ADHD moms. What is something that has been helpful for you, or maybe a small story that you can share that kind of worked?
Yeah. So last week I was having a really rough week in terms of my nervous system, just being dysregulated, having a hard time focusing, getting grounded. And my win is that I chose to lean into a strength workout instead of the cabinet, where I would have sat down a year ago and snapped on different things because I was feeling out of control. But instead, I chose to lean into a strength workout, which I just started lifting again for the first time in many, many years. I was an elite level gymnast. So I used to lift all the time, but I stopped because I would bulk up. But then I learned the alignment of how to fuel my body and work out without getting bulky. And because of that habit, that quick win was I was so stressed out, but instead of going to the cabinet and grabbing chips and cheese and salsa, which used to be my go-to, I went over, turned on my workout and grabbed my weights. And it literally just shifted my mindset for the rest of the day.
It's
Oh, yeah.
amazing. It's amazing how that does that. Yeah. Do you have a specific dedicated space too? That's helpful.
I'm laughing because people, my older son goes, Mom, you can work out anywhere. And I said, yes, that's why I invested in the program I'm in now, because I work out most of the time I work out in our family room or a great room, whatever people call it now. And I literally have my weights off to the side and my medicine ball and my exercise ball. I turn a show and my workouts last 30 to 45 minutes. So often I can get through a show while I'm doing it, but I could go to the basement, but no, people are walking around me and I just do it right there. Because why
Well,
not?
right. It's out of sight, out of mind, right? If it's somewhere where you're not going to be often, it's like, oh, I don't work out. What?
Or it gets you distracted trying to, like, I get into something else, but if they're right there, I always see them. Or I'm in my family room more than I'm in any other room in the house. So it's
Yeah.
like staring at me. So if I'm sitting on the couch, instead of sitting there and just watching TV, I'm like, why am I not standing up and working out while
Doing
I'm watching
something.
TV? It's a much more effective way to do things, right? So
Yeah.
is a habit. It was a big habit, but that habit turned into a really impactful win last week.
That's great. So maybe I should bring my 15-pound weights, just bring them up, set them by the TV, and I can at least be doing sit-ups or something. You're right.
Oh, yeah. It's better than nothing. Like
Yeah,
so we say.
exactly. Well, Lisa, I would love to hear a little bit more about your background and your story and what you do and how you help people, because you help people in so many different ways. So I'm just going to let you lead and kind of share your story.
Yeah. So I'm gonna back into it if that's okay.
Yeah.
One thing is I live in the messy middle. So I know, Jessica, you looked at my site and it's very personal. I live in that comfortable space where many people told me I shouldn't live. And what I learned was that living there made other people uncomfortable. And at one point in time, it stopped me from being me because so many people in society were telling me, do it differently. Don't be so emotional. Don't be so energetic. Don't be so passionate, whatever the case was. And so, um, I grew up as an elite level athlete, undiagnosed neurodivergent, went through school undiagnosed, went through
Hmm.
many years as in the corporate world in leadership and development and sales leadership and HR and all sorts of things that, again, undiagnosed. So met with a lot of friction because of how I think and do things. And then I became a mom. I was gifted not one, but two neurodivergent kiddos. And so my journey with this work started unknowingly when I was born, if you think about it, because I grew up as a neurodivergent
Mhm.
individual, I just didn't realize it. And I've learned so many things over the years. But the premise of what was originally called Bloom Special Education Advocacy, that's what I started my business with. That's my actual LLC, was because of my first son, who from the very beginning, there were struggles. And so very quickly, I had to learn to advocate for him. Thankfully, I had many people that guided me on that. Our first pediatrician, trust your gut. Your mom gut's right, because I'd gone in about something and somebody had told me I was wrong. The pediatrician was like, nope, you were spot on. So while I was entrusting myself for me, I learned as a first time mom very early on within the first 2 weeks to trust that intuition for my kids. And so it started with my older son, had many people help me navigate through the system. And then my younger one came along, typically developing until he wasn't. So there were lots of things that we did with him, very different neuro differences. And I was doing this work for free. At one point, my husband said, well, when are you ever going to get paid for it? I was still leading either, I was leading like staffing firm, and then I was in sales management, and then I was in HR leadership. So I always had these teams of people that maybe one or two understood me and the rest didn't. And this is all now while I was trying to navigate the world of two children that were neuro different, and I didn't really know what I didn't know. So aligning myself with all these partners and people through the years, I originally launched that first business, which, well, it's still a business. I just, my DBA now, doing business as is journey.
Right.
So, um, but it started out with this really narrow focus of special education advocacy. And I say narrow focus because for those first several years, I was met with this, like hands up, whoa, back off, we're against you, where the principal that asked me or recommended that I do this as a living wanted me to do it because I do things so differently. So when I go into a school, I'm there because of family. I'm there because of their why. The family had,
Mm.
for whatever reason that was. I'm there in collaboration with them and the school, but I'm really there for the child. And so because I walk with them, my clients hire me to work with them, not for them. And so, um, as time went on, I rebranded to Journey to Bloom.
And your website is journeytobloom, is it .com?
And
Okay.
Journey to Bloom.com. Yep. And I expanded into these different domains. So it doesn't matter if you're in the family room, the classroom, the boardroom, or the arena. I've lived in all those spaces. But when somebody comes to me, the lens upon which I go through is always a neurodiversity the lens of neurodivergence. I believe that neurodiversity is the prism lighting the table. Sometimes it's the child, sometimes it's my neurodifferences that are lighting the table. But that spectrum is what really brings us together to help people move through their why they hired me. Um, but in the original premise of it all was to help parents navigate the neurodiverse learning journey. And then over time, it became parents asking me to help them in their corporate lives or in their individual lives and things like that. So I have a variety of different certifications that you can find them on my site, or I can talk to somebody about them. But my 50 some years of lived experience is at the helm of it. And at the center is the fact that I am also neurodivergent.
Yeah, I've got lots of questions based on all of that. But the first is, when did you find out you were neurodivergent?
So I was diagnosed with anxiety in my early 20s, but I didn't realize that was what it is.
Mhm.
It's, under the neurodiversity umbrella. But I was also just labeled. I was given medicine and told to move on. And so that, I think, is what started me on my belief that diagnoses inform, they don't define, because I was never given the
Mhm.
tools and resources on how to work through it. So that was my first diagnosis. When I hit full on burnout, I say full on because burnout starts a long time before it actually
Mhm.
crushes you. But I was crushed to ashes during COVID. And it was in that time that I was diagnosed with ADHD. I was diagnosed with CPTSD, and so that was 6 years ago. And then in between those time periods, my younger son had a vision therapist, and he had visual processing differences, and we were training him to do his home program. The the vision therapist looked at me and said, "You could really use vision therapy." And I said, "What do you mean?" She's like, "How were you ever an elite level gymnast? I don't understand. Your depth perception, your peripheral is so out of whack. It's like, the side mirrors and the rearview mirror that says objects in the mirror are closer than they appear." She's like, that's your eyes. You are way out of whack." And we didn't know back then. There was no diagnosis for that, or at least not enough information that you would have known to go and have that happen. So it started in my 20s with the anxiety, but unknowing what that meant. But then after becoming a mom, um, I was 15 years, almost 15 years into being a mom before I got my first,
Mhm.
um, my first additional diagnosis.
And I mean, that must have been looking back thinking, wow, okay, I see it now. I see how all those pieces fit together and it makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Everything makes sense. And it's so interesting, Jessica, because I honestly always said I didn't care if I was diagnosed. However, what it's done is it has allowed me to get back to being free to be me, fully free to be me, and educating others on what it means to be me, and then letting them choose if they want to come along with me or continue to try and make me feel less than. And I say try because it used to work, but it doesn't anymore.
No, no, you talked about before. I don't know if you mentioned it here, a recovering people pleaser.
Yeah, I did not mention it here, but yes, I don't try to please anybody anymore.
Yeah. And I think we get to that point now that we're, coming into the late 40s and 50s. Like, as we're older and your kids are getting older, it's like I don't have time. I don't have time for that. I just want to be able to live my life. Free. I don't know if that's the right word, but it just feels more free and light, just light, I guess. And we want that so much for our kids. And I see, right now we're struggling with our boys in school, and one in particular. It's like not getting homework done and not, trying to figure out what's the problem. Like, are the teachers telling you the homework or he's not writing things down? And so I know you work with a lot of families with that struggle of kids in school and just not like they're really smart. They're really smart. Um, as a mom with ADHD, having a kid with ADHD, I'm trying to figure out how to navigate their learning journey because I didn't have this support when I was young and I struggled. I did very well, but I worked 10 times harder than everybody else, you know. And so what does that look like, with you partnering with families in schools, whether that's a public school, a private school, homeschool, and are there differences in how you approach that and how you support those families?
I'm writing notes because I'll forget what you said and I would have interrupted.
I'll forget what I said too. So,
So there's a couple of things. Before we go into that, I just want to share the thing about being free. So for me, I didn't just get there in my late 40s, early 50s. I'm going to be 54 in a couple months. Often say that burnout was the worst and best thing that happened to me because I finally, for the first time in my life, put myself first instead of focusing on everyone else. And a lot of that stems from how I was brought up, which I've learned too through my last several years in therapy and unpacking how I became what I became, how my surroundings and society um, influenced or impact or didn't influence those pieces. So I also didn't, I didn't know what I didn't know growing up. You didn't know what you didn't know growing up. And so we didn't have those things. I did work 10 times harder, but I also didn't get good grades. So I worked 10 times harder. And the harder I worked, the
and no
dumber.
reward.
And so I got my way through things. Looking back, everything is much clearer. And my sole focus as a parent, I would say like my North Star is to ensure that my children never felt the way that I did growing up. Did it backfire on me? Sure, sometimes because I was coddling, I was enabling, I was doing those things. But then
Or yeah.
burnout also helped me recognize one, well, I couldn't be everything to everyone because I didn't have the capacity to do that, but also showed me just how strong and resilient my children are. But I also did a lot of early intervention, a lot of things with them. So the journey for both of my kids started, and my younger one started around 2.5. My older one
Mhm.
started when he was 2 months old. So I was truly working with them and advocating for them since their early days. So when I partner with families, it is different. Every family is different. That's where I was saying I can tell you who I am, what I do, and how I do it, but that why is yours. It's yours to choose. Also, the term why triggers me because growing up, I was always asked, why do you think that way? Why would you do that? Why do you want? Why? And see, for me, it's like a tense feeling when somebody would ask me, huh, that's interesting. How is that making you feel? Or what made you think that? Or um, who shared that with you? Or, or who told you that? Anything that wasn't directed at like a stab in the heart kind of thing. Like the
Yeah.
way is like a harsh word to me. But there is why behind it. And oftentimes when parents come to me, I just interestingly just came to this realization last night because we were talking about, I was talking about why last week on another episode with somebody else. And it really is, why is that heavy? Why is heavy to me? The who, the what, the how, or the me wrapping my arms around the collaboration and us moving together. But the why someone comes to me or the why someone wants to work with me, that's theirs to unpack. I can be there in that center to help them get that clarity, the confidence, and the courage, which is what my is called my
Mhm.
clarity, confidence, courage journey map. And so I can help them get there, but they have to be willing to go there with me. And so the one thing that is non-negotiable, regardless if I'm working with a family that hasn't had their kids start school yet, because they might be like in pre-K or in Maryland, we call it infants and toddlers. Uh,
Mhm.
In California, it's called a regional center. I don't know what it's called. Like every state has a little bit of a
Oh,
different
okay.
it. But really, it's the 0 to 3-year-old support, and then it's 3 to 5, and then they go into the school at either 5 or 6. And so I work with parents across that all the way up through high school. I've more recently had some ask me, will you help me transition my child into college? Because they
Yeah.
have worked with me during other years. And so there are certain aspects of that I will lean into, but there are a lot that I won't because it's not my expertise. And there are other people. So what I don't do with parents is I don't go into mediation. I don't do say complaints. I do more of the middle and helping people understand all those factors and take more of a train the trainer philosophy where my ultimate goal is to have people figure out what's happening and then have them say, I don't need you right now. And then come back to me when they need me. It's kind of like let
Mhm.
free, right? When they have the tools and they're feeling clear and confident and courageous to do it on their own. Um, but I do partner with families and each approach is different based on their needs. So would you be okay if I use your circumstances that we were talking about with your 7?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Here's like a little, and I, so this isn't bothering anyone.
I
This
like
month.
the little no, it's not bothering me at all. I was like, "Can I get one?"
So it's awesome to show you. So it's got squishy here and then it's hard there. And then you can also spin it. So it's got like all the different, I know
My
it's great.
daughter would love that.
So I think we bought them off of Amazon and there was like a whole packet and all different types. So some were hard on the outside. This one's squishy. So it's
Yeah.
good. Yeah. So, um,
I love it, little fidget toys while you're recording.
so, your son is in 7th grade and you were sharing how not getting his homework turned in. You mentioned he is diagnosed ADHD. There's an executive functioning component to it. So a couple of years ago, I actually got certified in executive functioning, not because I want to be a coach, because I'm certified to do it now. Oh, because I wanted schools to understand that it was not separate. And I honestly got tired of school saying I didn't know what I was talking about. And so instead of getting frustrated and what they would have called defensive, where I would say it was my lived experience, I went and got a certification in it. So now I can share with them there is an intersectionality with ADHD, kids that are autistic, which there's that ADHD or AD intersection. And then language differences. So there's all these different facets. And you could just have struggles with executive functioning. That is possible. You might have time blindness. You might have a really hard time getting started. It could be a reaction to anxiety or a trigger, trauma trigger or something. But there is an executive functioning thread, if you
Through
will,
line, yeah.
a through line. Yep. So with him not completing his work, I would go down a series of questions with you in terms of where do you see that most often? Is it in a particular class? Is that at a certain type of day? Are there certain connectors that are, and that are stopping him from getting started? Maybe it is just a matter of forgetfulness of turning it in. And so we would talk about those things, and then we would talk about, does he currently have a 504 plan or an IEP? If it's only the supports and accommodations that he needs and he doesn't need specially designed instruction, then we would be looking potentially at asking for a meeting to discuss the need for a 504 plan. And then you go through a whole series of, is there a qualifying diagnosis, which he would have one,
Mhm.
it would be OHI, other health impairment. And then let's talk about it. Where is he struggling? What is he struggling with? Okay. Without these accommodations in place, does he have equal access to what everyone else, his same age, non disabled peers? I hate that term, but that's what they call it, non disabled peers. And so we'd look at those facets and we would meet with the team, with the school team. We would talk about those things. And then if he qualifies and if yes, we agree that these things are needed, then we could put a 504 plan in place. In some cases, now the state I live in, it's almost, well, not going to say impossible, almost impossible to get an IEP just for executive functioning. However, in Pennsylvania, where my couple of my best friends live,
That's where we are, yep.
one of my best friends lives outside of Philly, and they called me a few years ago and said they want to give my son an IEP just for executive functioning. And I said, "What? Take it." Like, I was blown away by the fact they were willing to do that. And it was a whole conversation of the labeling. I don't want him to look different, all the shameful things. So that's the why. That's the why that person came to me to talk about it. They were feeling ashamed. They didn't know if their child would look different. And my thing is, the more you give someone, the more opportunity they have to be successful. So let them. That whole let them theory, like I've never actually, but for me, let them judge you, let them do those things. Because if it's helping you do something better, I wish I had been given all those tools growing up. I would have let
Mhm.
anything if I knew it was helping me get where I needed to go. And so the person, that child is now 3 years in with an IEP specifically for executive functioning. And there are some classes that can be specific for executive functioning, some tutorials, some a course that's supposed to help with um, mapping out assignments, with graphic organizers, with making sure there's checklists to ensure that they are getting things done. Check-in, check-out processes with with a teacher at the beginning of the day and the end of the day,
Yeah.
in between. So there's all these things that can be put in place. Some with the 504, if it's just as accommodations, but if it is a matter of truly not having the tools and understanding of how to get started or how to move from A to B to C and completing an assignment and then turning it in, then possibly there might need to be specially designed instruction, which would require an IEP. But if it's really more a matter of the checklists, the graphic organizers, organizer book, some check in, check outs to make sure they're staying on top of things, there may be other ways to do it without that specially designed instruction. So again, some schools might have that what we call here a tutorial. It depends on what grade you're in, but in the middle schools, it's called a let's say instructional seminar might be what it's called in middle school, but you have to have an IEP to be able to get it. So if you were in my state and I knew a child needed those things, we would push to try to get goals because that's the only way they could get into that class. In other states, I don't know if it's in all of Pennsylvania, but the part that I'm more familiar with, which is like the Blue Route. Well, I mean, I grew up in the Lehigh Valley, so up the Blue,
Okay.
all of these
Yes,
schools.
I'm on the other side of Pennsylvania, closer to Ohio and New York.
Okay, okay.
So, yeah.
So I don't know exactly, but I know in that other corridor, um, I would know that, some of those things, they didn't necessarily need an IEP. So part of it would be understanding not just your child's circumstances, the why behind you coming, and also how your particular school district works. Because even within my county, I can go into 6 different schools. They can all be middle schools, all be elementary, or all be high school, and every one of them will have a different interpretation of what they're doing. It's scary.
And that's so hard as a parent because you're like, I don't know how to help them. I don't know what to do. And we do have our kids in a private education. And so it's like IEP and the 503, like, I don't know. They just handle things differently. And the thing is, they absolutely will help any way they can. There's the support is there, but the how is not.
That's interesting. So, Jessica, so for example, the IEP and the 504 plans are for public education
Right. That's what I was
or
understanding.
non-public. So, if you are a school that the public school is paying for the child to go to because they need a more restrictive environment in order to access FAPE, which is a free and appropriate public education, then there are that. I'll use Maryland as an example because that's the most familiar I am with the private and private, non-public, and parochial systems. For the private schools, for private, so they're not like a Catholic denomination or a parochial. They're not a non-public where they're supported, where they align with the school system and they have an IEP in place. Then some of those schools don't have any of those pieces of scaffolding, or they'll try to do it as a one off. If you're in some of the schools that are parochial schools, they will have their own version of an IEP or a 504 plan. So, like where both of my kids ended up in private. My older son, they did call it a 504 plan, even though it wasn't the 504 plan, but that we
Sure.
were able to align it and still get him what he needed in college based on that and his former IEP from years past. My younger son, we have more of like an individualized personal plan. I think we were calling him an IPP. But we also have all of our accommodations. So we can convert them if somebody goes back into like a public or into a non-public school
Yeah.
where it's done. So all of those things would depend on how I would meet them. So for someone in your circumstances who is at a private school and they don't technically have the IEP or the 504 plans, they have the willingness and the desire
Oh, yeah.
education. I would approach yours differently. I would approach it with, um, you could hire me to work with you to have a meeting with the school team to talk about creative ways to help your son.
Mhm.
Things that maybe they don't know or they don't know they don't know
Mhm.
because they only know what they know, right? So it's
Right.
the unknown unknowns. That's for that's for the friction point is with many people outside of me, but that's
Yeah.
also my guiding light is as that prism lighting the table. I think in the nonlinear, I think gray, I think kind of this way, almost like a weaving. I don't
Mhm.
go up and down and I don't go straight side to side. And so getting really curious with, have you tried this? Okay, how does that work? Talking with you, I would even include your son because he's in middle school. So he knows he might know what's stopping him, but he might not know. And so trying to
Mhm.
figure what pieces he doesn't even know he doesn't know about. And then I would work in unison with you on what you're seeing at home and what you're trying to do. Like you had mentioned to me, you at one point were going into school to do homework with him. Well, that's not sustainable. And
No,
now I'm
it's
learning
not.
paying for a private school education. You shouldn't ever have to do that. And so I would come in as that middle consultant When I work with organizations and schools proper, I often call myself a neurodivergent success partner because I am
I like it.
neurodivergent and I am a success partner. When I'm working as some people will call me an education advocate, some will call me a special education advocate. I call myself a neurodiversity consultant in part because it gets people to lean in and ask me what that means instead of lean back and be like, oh, great, she's here to tell me what to do. I don't tell my clients what to do. I don't tell the schools what to do. I want to understand what they need. And then I help them figure out that path forward.
Yeah. Oh, well, I can definitely see how that would be a great help. And I just feel like I'm not the only one, and that's why I started this podcast because I started having these conversations with other moms. Like, is your kid turning, like, is he turning in? Is he having trouble? Like, is everybody else in the class having trouble? No, but there are a couple that are. And the teachers are amazing. They're all supportive, but there's just things that fall through the gaps, right? And as a mom who's working from home and businesses and, doing a podcast and having kids, like I want to be the best mom that I can be and I want to support them. You just get to a point where you're like, I don't I don't know what I don't know. And I don't know what resources are out there.
A- And that's it. And so when I first started the business as Bloom Special Education Advocacy, my mottos were every child deserves to live their best life. And every parent and caregiver deserves the tools and resources to help them get there. And it's still on my site because it's a part of what I do. And you're absolutely right. And the one thing I would I'll say this to you and to anyone that's listening, it's okay to not be okay. And you're never going to know everything. I've been doing this 20 years and there's still a lot for me to learn. And every circumstances is unique. You may be in the same ocean, but you're not on the same boat. And so in your situation, Jessica, I would almost, not almost, I would, if you were to come to me and say, here's what's going on, like we're talking about here, and wanting me to come in as working with you, I would offer and I would recommend a dual relationship, one where you could hire me to work with you in some of those facets if you want to advocate. But then there's the other side of it is your heart is telling you there's more than just your child and you're
Mhm.
even doing this podcast to help more than just your child. I would say I would recommend instead of you paying me, let's go to the private school. Let's talk to them. Let's see if I can go through and do some education with the teachers. So I didn't say teaching or training. I'm saying education. So they're teaching something with what they know. When I educate them, I'm using things to help them implement and practice and evaluate. See, that's where my ripe ideas comes in. Reflect, implement, practice, and evaluate. The I is lowercase, implement in small increments. But then we're threading neurodiversity through everything through a different lens and what they were taught to do and what they've learned how to teach upon. So then I'm helping them gain those tools and resources to not just help themselves be even better teachers, but then to help their kids be the best students they can be.
Yeah. And that's like and I love that you went back and you have that executive functioning certification because I didn't know that that was available, but that's totally the path that I'm like, do I need to get something to teach me something so I can help educate like cuz they're brilliant. No, there's nobody that's dumb or doesn't want to help. It's just we only know what we know and if we're a teacher for a long time, this is just how we do things. And not just my little situation. I think education in general. I mean, I feel like there's this huge education piece to be able to teach on a nationwide scale, and I guess you're doing this in the trenches and you're seeing all of this. And
It's
I
a
love,
systemic issue across the world, not even I will say the world, at least I can tell you in the UK and in other parts of Europe that I know people in, this is a systemic issue. It is not something specific to the States.
yeah, and I think, the way our world is changing and the culture and bringing in AI. It's a fascinating time to be having conversations like this. I just don't know where it's gonna go, but I think there's a lot of people that are like, "I don't know where it's going either, but I wanna help."
Mhm.
Yeah.
The human element, that's the thing that's never going to go away. People are so afraid that AI is going to take over the world, but the human element, the place where that intuition, the place that
Yeah.
I've always lived, where I say to my older son sometimes, I was born in the wrong, century or decade. And he says, no, you weren't, because you wouldn't get to do what you do every day to help others help themselves had you been born sooner. You went through everything you went through, mom, so that you can help others go through it differently.
Yeah. And your son said that to you because that's the way his brain works. Like he sees it. And
Yeah.
it's beautiful. Like I love that we have all of these different thinkings and it's not we do need people who are linear thinkers,
Mhm.
but we need people who think in bubbles as well, right? To make these connections. And so,
And we need each other to appreciate them instead of push back against them. Because I grew up my entire life until I hit burnout, having people push against me and me being like a whack-a-mole that just kept getting lower and lower and lower and lower into the ground. And and now I know that there are lots of people out there like me. I'm having a conversation with one right here. You are one of my people. And the more I engage with those that are like me, the more capacity I have to do
good.
more. And knowing that whole thing about I can't be everything to everyone, and everyone for me, I'm not for everyone. And that is okay. I will just choose to surround myself with those people that lift me up, that are willing to go there with me, and that understand that differences are just that. They're not deficits, they are truly just differences. And when you get curious to lean in and try to understand one another and appreciate one another versus bringing up things in history that we weren't even alive to see, things will eventually shift for the better if we just let go and lean in.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And we have to rely on each other too, right? We're not our own little silos. Like we were made to be in community with each other and have these conversations. In fact, I was just looking, you're also the author of Confident You, the Raw Conversations. Um, is that all part of your story and the burnout process? And
Oh, it is. That just gave me chills. So the the uh vision behind it is from the curator of it, I guess, if you will, is Julie DeLuca Collins. She had this vision to bring 20 some of us, I want to say there were 23 in total, together to each write a chapter in this book. And so all of us had been on her podcast at some point in time. And there was just something about our stories that just really lit her up and made her think deeply. And just she thought that the world needed to hear some of our stories. And so that is how I became an author. I mean, I've had published like poems and stuff, but that's how I had my first chapter in a book. And my chapter is chapter 12 in the book, and it's called Unbecoming to Become, Finding
it's beautiful.
Beauty in the Chaos. And I would be happy to share a PDF copy of my chapter with you. Anybody that wants the chapter, I'm happy to share it with them if they want an email in the show notes, and then they just say that you're the way that they found out about me. That way I can track that for you too. Um, but the book itself, all the proceeds go to one of a few nonprofits. We're rotating who that nonprofit is, so we don't
Oh,
even
that's cool.
of it. It's us giving back. There's amazing stories in there in all different facets. Mine's just one of the many.
Well, that's neat. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that PDF too with our audience. I think it's something we can read a chapter. It's not a whole book. We can read the chapter for sure.
Yeah, it goes into a little bit about my burnout. It goes into how I became to become, right?
Mhm.
I really got back to being free to be me for the first time in many, many years. It has a little snippet into how I've worked with a professional client and changed their trajectory, how I worked with
Mm.
a parent client and changed their trajectory. So there's little snippets of things questions in there, some takeaways. So I definitely encourage you, if anything we talked about here just resonates with your audience, they would probably get something out of it. And I'll definitely share the chapter with you as well because I
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah, I'll definitely follow up and we'll put a link in the show notes so everybody has that as well.
that's good.
Awesome. Well, oh gosh, I wish we could keep talking. There's so many things that we could pick apart and just ask more about, and just even your personal story. Thank you for being very candid and talking about your personal journey. Um, it's not easy, but we're still here and we learn resilience and we have hope that,
Yeah. The connections and these stories, it's what makes us human. As you said, we are supposed to be in community with each other. And if I'm not helping others help themselves, then what's the point? I'm not going to help the world, but if I can change the world for one person, then it's worth it. And I feel like just even this conversation with the two of us, I've learned things today and gotten to know another person who
yeah,
belongs in my world. So I'm grateful for that.
yeah.
And I'd be happy to have another conversation with you. I think, like you said, we could go down many different pathways.
Yeah, I'd love to have you back on the show again. Even just figuring out how, next steps for parents who are navigating this, and of course, reaching out to you. And I will have those in the show notes too, so people can reach out to you personally. Um, there's so much work to be done, and I get overwhelmed with, like I said, a big picture, like it needs to be in all the schools, and we need to educate, but it's these little steps
Right.
that lead up to that, and the
I
connections.
That
The little
small
I.
and ideas, implementing inclusivity takes a lot of time and effort and intentional effort.
Intention.
And what you're doing is absolutely helping more people than it helped before you started doing it. So
Right.
there's, every day that you show up and have these conversations with people like me and people different than me, because we all come through a different lens,
Mhm.
the more you're helping the world. So um, I think as both of us were both diagnosed ADHD,
Mhm.
it's that we got to get it done. We got to get it done.
I
And
feel that pressure every day, "God, it's gotta get done, gotta get done." It never stops.
the biggest thing I learned when I hit burnout was the world's going to keep moving no matter how fast I go. And that if I do one thing really well, it's better than me trying to get 10 things done in the day. And I have learned to go slow to go fast. And
Yeah,
it
I'm learning that.
is the most freeing feeling. If I need to sit on the couch and not lift because I've already done that or whatever, or one day I need to take a break and I literally just need my body to relax or go to sleep or whatever, I give myself permission to do that now. And as an ADHDer and then a mom of an ADHDer, if when we're not listening to our bodies as moms, so and I've got two, right? My other one's autistic and they both have lots of neuro differences. But when we're not giving ourselves permission to take that time for us, you may too end up in burnout like I did. And
Mhm.
if that's the only thing people get out of my story is don't go there because it's not fun,
No,
then
I've
I'm
been there.
it too because it's not a fun place to be. I don't
No,
wish it on anyone.
no, and I think a lot of us find ourselves out, on, like, a little it's a burnout cycle.
Yeah,
So maybe not a completely crash and burn, but a repetitive burnout cycle that we're not recognizing as burnout.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, listen to your body,
Listen to
listen
your
to your gut,
body.
especially as mom.
Oh, yeah. And listen and then do something about it. Don't just, "Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll take a break."
Yes. Yeah. Don't do the elephant in the room. Don't name it and tame it and then brush it under the rug. I like to call it the moose on the table. You need to get in there and have that difficult conversation and move through those pieces so that you can release them and then you can move forward. Because if you just name them and tame them and brush them under the rug, they come
They're
back up and
still
they come
there.
out you. And they come
Yeah,
back with vengeance,
yeah. They reproduce under the carpet,
like gremlins.
right? Yes, like gremlins. You pour a little water on them and oh, that movie terrified me as a kid. Oh, how funny. Well, Lisa, I appreciate you being on the show. You're just a wealth of information, and I hope people reach out to you. Sometimes we're just in the middle of that chaos, and we don't know how to fix something. And it's nice that you're available. You've had this story, you have the background, you know what to do, and it's so nice having that resource. So, Lisa, thank you for sharing your story and being here.
Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.